Hello everyone, my name is Daniel and I'm just a casual racer, and today I'm going to be doing an in-depth review of Turtle Beach's Velocity 1 pedals, which are part of the Velocity 1 race bundle. Now, currently is $650, so it's rather steep, definitely well into that mid-range price range, although you do get a button box wheelbase, which I've already reviewed in a previous video, so check that out after this video. And then now I'm doing the pedals that are also included. I will say that some of the concerns, kind of a general tackiness and some other issues, I don't really find that same approach to the pedals. So just generally as a quick summary here at the front, these pedals actually are reasonably well positioned for what they are, depending on the price. What is, Turtle Beach, did they blow a lot of the budget on these pedals? Well, if that's the case, then maybe these aren't quite as good, but obviously we don't know at this point. So I'll touch on that more on the end of the video, but for now, let's jump right into the driving experience. Alrighty, so the first thing obviously is talking about the driving experience, the braking experience, how do these pedals perform, and diving into in depth. So throttle and clutch, I'm going to touch on them right now because they're essentially the same. For my own purpose, they are adjustable though, so you can adjust the preload essentially by cranking down. Right here you'll see, you can adjust this down right there, crank it down, and that'll stiffen the spring up, at least on the initial press, right? Because it's already like partway compressed. And when you do that, it gives a slightly stiffer initial feel, although it does shorten the throw just slightly. And so I did that with the clutch actually, because I want the clutch to feel slightly different from the throttle, and I actually think it comes across reasonably well. Obviously a lot of pedals now have adjustable and replaceable springs, including rubber dampers, spring strengths, a lot of different stuff that they'll include in a kit. Sometimes they'll have hydraulic dampers, things like that they will include. This does not come with that, and it doesn't seem super easy to modify to make it more adjustable for someone coming along as a third party, for example, which is unlike the CSL pedals, which actually are quite third party modifiable very easily. So that's something that's a little bit, and I'll touch on that more. But like I said, there's nothing really that bad with the throttle or the clutch. They're both a very decent experience. You have a reasonably strong spring, I think, included. Some people might find it a little bit on the strong side. I know some people, they like a really soft throttle. This is not a super soft throttle, but to me, it's great. So spring strength's quite good for an entry-level, mid-range, even level pedal set. Clutch, obviously, there could be a bite point added. There isn't, but at least you can adjust it to where they feel different, which to me is at least something. Obviously, though, right, the biggest thing about a pedal is, in terms of the driving experience, is the brake. It's the most important part, in a lot of ways, of your entire sim racing experience. It's what makes you fast on a track, if you really care about that. And load cells have been shown to make you faster once you get used to using a pressure-based system. And that's why Turtle Beach, obviously, they want to go in with the hype. They want to deliver more of that mid-range product here. And so they've chosen to deliver a load cell. It's a 50-kilogram load cell. It's interesting, right? So my first impression when I'm moving these pedals in my hand was, oh, okay, it feels pretty good. There's a little more movement than load cells sometimes have. For example, thinking of the Acetec pedals, which are high-quality pedals, but I've had a chance to use those on a friend's setup, and I cannot stand the short movement of a brake. I like to drive vintage cars. I like to drive road cars when I'm on a sim, and I want to have the option to have a lot of travel in my brake pedal, like you would on an old car when you put your foot to the floor on the brake, and your foot goes a whole half a foot or farther to get to the floor. I need that to be something that I can simulate. You don't get that with this load cell. However, it does have a bit more travel than what you might get on, let's say, a really stiff load cell. Downside is, though, there's no adjustments. So when you don't have any adjustments on a load cell like this, it means unless you really kind of like the feel of this, and it's pretty good as it is, you can't change it. And when you're buying a $650 bundle, which is supposed to include everything, to me, I think there's some adjustments would be nice. There are some software settings that you can get into, and you can make changes to the sensitivity, but let me tell you, you want this on 100%. The other sensitivity settings are not good. You get 0 or 25%, 50%, and 100%. You want 100%, especially on the brake. And so you don't really have any options. You just have the good setting, the rest are terrible. So maybe there's some small adjustments they'll be able to make in the software, such as being able to add, a dead zone at the end or things like that will give more customizability that we see through other more sim racing focused manufacturers with their software options. But in terms of the actual hardware itself, there are 0 adjustments, and there's no way really to make adjustments with it. So that's a little bit of a downside. How does it feel? This is a load cell, a 50 kilogram load cell pedal. It's not got like no travel. There is a bit of travel, so more than some load cells have, which I appreciate, but it still is a load cell. So you're going to move, and then you're going to, for me, it seemed to correspond when you had it on 100% sensitivity, which it needs to be in the setting. It seemed to correspond to you get to about 70% of braking force, and then the movement stops, and now you're pushing into the load cell from that last point. So actually, for me, threshold braking, trail braking, those things were actually fine to do with this pedal set, and I got quite comfortable doing that, which is obviously what you want in a load cell brake, because you want to be using that pressure to modulate your braking force, as it's more accurate once you get used to it than just distance-based pedals. So that is, reasonably well done for what this is. I mean, like I mentioned, it's a bit hard because we don't know what is the value they're assigning this. But if this is $150, then this is really a solid option for getting a load cell pedal set, although there's very little adjustment. So generally, the driving experience on these pedals actually was quite decent. And when I got them out of the box, you feel the metal plates here underfoot. I tend to drive in swim shoes or socks when I'm driving, and you can kind of definitely feel the difference between a plastic or a metal finish. The grip with the rivets here are reasonably well done. It definitely looks like you could also, in terms of adjustment, you could move the screws here with an Allen key and adjust exactly where the plate sits. So there's some adjustment there if you really, for example, don't love maybe the positioning of where the clutch or the brake is right next to each other, or throttle or whatever. You could shift the plates. You could shift, you can shift all the plates up. There's one more screw below them, so you could shift them all up one at least if you have really long feet, or just the positioning of how you have it on your rig or under your desk. You want just a little more height on the pedals. That's something you can do. So it's not like there's absolutely no adjustments that you can make. It's just very limited adjustments. There is a minor adjustment you can make on the clutch here. I prefer it on the default setting, but you can experiment with that. Otherwise, though, there's not a lot of adjustment other than like with the preload. Overall, the driving experience with these pedals is better than I think a lot of people might have expected from my wheelbase review. But generally, I was reasonably quick. The throttle feel pretty good. I mean, yeah, would I now like a little bit of a stiffer throttle now that I've been sim racing for a little longer, and I've been in some older cars and race cars that have a really stiff throttle? Yeah, it's quite nice to have that option. But in terms of being a good, solid spring strength and functioning of the throttle, you couldn't ask for more on an entry or mid-level throttle. The clutch, right? Once again, most entry-level and mid-range clutches don't have a bite point. This has some adjustments so you can make it feel different. Once again, right there in the midst of them, there's nothing wrong with this. It's not doing anything to stand out with either the clutch or the accelerator, but there's nothing here to either knock points either. So we're right down the middle, right on the side of being a recommend for kind of where they're shooting for this. Alrighty, so now I want to take a turn and look at the quality of this pedal set. Overall, it is mostly a cheap plastic all around the pedal here, and unfortunately there is flex, and that's something I need to talk about. Obviously not really noticeable on the throttle or the clutch, but on the brake when you're putting full pressure into it, the plastic base plate will flex. And obviously if you have it mounted on an 80/20 rig where it's kind of pushed against something in the very back, you're going to minimize that flex. But if you obviously don't have it maybe tightened down to something stiffer, then there's going to be flex present in the plastic. And it even was very slight, as you can see in these close-ups here, that there was some slight movement even with that. Now, is that perceptible? You know, can I perceive that movement when I'm driving? No, I really can't. So is there a little bit of a worry about maybe it breaking? No, it's pretty thick plastic. I've seen plastic move like that for a long time without any issues. Is there a worry about it affecting the braking experience? If that amount of flex in the plate and you notice that when braking, then you're at a level where you need some higher end pedals than this. Let's just put it that way. For what it is, the amount of flex, I don't believe is that much of an issue. Yes, is it going to take a little bit of a point off here for the quality? Of course. Is it a part of this? Is it enough to say you can't get this? There's just so much flex in it. No, it's not enough to do that either. It's got this metal aluminum profile plate here in the front. I actually thought this gave a decent amount of grip for the bottom of my shoes when I was in there, or even in my socks. So this feels quite nice. And then also when you're resting your feet on that, it gives a little more of a premium, that cool feel, you know, rather than if it was just plastic. So overall, the quality, although I do have to knock it a little bit, generally is quite good. I'll go on to the plates here. This is, you know, metal. There is, you know, some plastic components here and there, but generally most of this is metal. And like I mentioned, the spring is solid. You have the adjustment points, which work quite well. Everything seems relatively well anchored, although there is side-to-side play. You can see this. That's partly due to just how it's affixed, not being enough bolts hooking these into the plastic. And then even if there were, the plastic does, like I mentioned, have some slight fat flex in it. Once again, not really perceptible, definitely not in the throttle or the clutch. The brake, when I'm putting a lot of pressure, sure, there might be a little bit of side-to-side movement, but if you're doing braking properly, you're not really going to notice it. And they do include, you know, pads here, which I think is a nice touch. I actually have these smooth, grippier pads since I was resting it on my 80/20 profile rig, the metal, and I wanted a little more grip for it to sit into. But, you know, you're going to be using this, a lot of people are going to be using this in a scenario where they're not on an 80/20 rig, you know, and they're using the Xbox in the living room or on the carpet. And at that point, a little bit of movement isn't the biggest deal. So, yes, we'll take away some points for flex. But otherwise, I don't have any issue with this. Zero software problems, zero issues using the brake or the other pedals when driving. So, I mean, at this point, it's really one of those where, yeah, you know, it's kind of coming down to a price comparison and a market comparison. Because otherwise, this is a product I can recommend if the price is right. I want to compare these pedals against some strong, you know, options that are roughly at this price point. So if we're looking at kind of the $130 price point, which, you know, what does that get you in the market? Well, it gets you the Thrustmaster T3PM pedals. So the Thrustmaster T3PM pedals, right? Metal plate here on the front, plastic here, primarily plastic, right? Base plate, all that. Very similar, actually, in a lot of ways. No load cell brake, though. Although you do get adjustable spring options, which is nice. You have a little more adjustment in terms of spring, but there's no preload adjustment. No preload adjustment here on the throttle or the clutch. I would actually say the clutch is a bit stiffer than what you would get by default on the throttle or the clutch here. But when you adjust the preload, then that actually makes the initial press stiffer on the clutch. So the throttle is much softer. So you have what I would say is a all-around better product in terms of quality, in terms of actually the adjustments you can do. And yes, the brake, although I would say the brake, if you're not a big fan of load cell brakes, then might be reasonably comparable based on some of the more adjustments you can do with this. But generally, right, this is a load cell brake, which is what a lot of people are looking for. So this really, if this is $130, this would wipe the floor. Even $150, this really is a much better option, the Velocity 1 pedals, than the Thrustmaster T3 PM pedals. So now if we take a look at something like Fanatec CSL pedals, you know, that's the $200 point. And if you're looking at a $200 price point, it becomes a lot stiffer competition. You can get a load cell built included, 3 pedals, load cell with the Fanatec pedals here. I will say the load cell is nothing more special. There's a few more adjustments you can make in terms of changing out elastomers and changing out, maybe adding custom springs and stuff like that, which I would say would give the slight advantage for the load cell on the Fanatec pedals. The other thing that is actually, there's more metal. This is all built in. There's much more stiffness at $200. And right now I actually have a Race Sim Engineering third-party kit installed, which I think takes this to a whole nother level. I have third-party rumble motors attached. And really, you can just keep adding things like that, right? You also, like, this doesn't have the load cell right now. You don't have to. You can just get a clutch pedal, you know, and it's under $100. It's $80, $90 to get this as a 2-pedal set, and then you get another $30, and you can add the clutch pedal. And there's just a building up that you can do with the CSL pedals here that, to me, does give the edge, and also just the third-party options through the design of having, you know, holes that just happen to be in great position to create your own additions. You know, third-party, home-based, smaller companies creating some really good hardware options to enhance the CSL pedals, which you don't get here. And then, of course, this is the Fanatec Elite pedals. Right now they have the V2 version. They're at $300, and they have a really great load cell. One of the better ones, in my opinion. Just the V1s, and the V2s are supposed to be even better, even though I've never tested those. And so those are at $300, and so to me, that's really not even a comparison you can make with these pedals. Just the build quality overall, it's a whole nother level. So for me, right, it's that $150 to $200 kind of value point that this is coming in at. And as kind of concluding this video, right, that's something that you have to take into consideration. What is the value of this pedal set within the larger ecosystem, or the larger bundle of Turtle Beach? And right now, if it's the right price, $150 or less, there's really a reasonable value proposition, but I don't know that right now. And that's why, in terms of like trying to give this a rating, value proposition, I got to go with like a 5 out of 10, right down the middle, because we just don't know yet. They could be putting a $250 value on this, which would be crazy. It could be putting a $100 value on this, which would make, oh, this is like an 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10 recommendation of value. So 5 out of 10 down the middle. Overall, though, I am going to give a tentative recommendation, a 6 out of 10 on these pedals. There is nothing here that is, you know, exceptional or makes up for the rest of the Turtle Beach bundle, so check that out. I got a link down in the video description, as I mentioned. And there's some issues, but there's also no major flaws with these pedals either. If these are part of another bundle, maybe a different bundle or a version 2 of the Turtle Beach set, there's no need. They don't really need to make any changes. If the price is right, this is a good, reasonable product for what it is, and could be one of the most affordable ways to get a load cell brake if that's something you really want, which works just like a load cell brake should work. So I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10 and a tentative recommendation, and I really think it's a decent pedal set for what it is. It's not the issue in this bundle. So check out that video. Hopefully, you know, this insight, this deep dive into this pedal set is good and informative. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week, and make sure to catch my comparison video between the Turtle Beach wheelbase as against the CSL DD wheelbase and the Camas. That's going to be coming out next week. Hope to catch you then.